Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Dark Fringe Radio. I'm your host, of course, Will Martinez, and thank you for joining us on another episode and adventure here on Dark Fringe Radio, your number one source for the paranormal, conspiracy theory, and true crime. Tonight we have a very special guest. His name is Attorney Brian Pakett, and he's a criminal defense attorney here in West Palm Beach, Florida, locally here to us here at Dark Fringe Radio Studios. And we'll be talking about a lot of the insights of the criminal defense side. But before we get into all that goodness, I want to remind everybody how you can listen to the podcast. Very simple. Please make sure you go to our website, darkfringeradio.com, and that's where the source is. Every episode is on that our podcast website there, and of course, you can see our merch store and any investigations that we have done lately. So all that stuff is there. It's a great place to really get started. If you're looking for more information on Dark Fringe Radio, go to darkfringeradio.com, and of course, our social media sites: Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Dark Fringe Radio. Make sure you check us out there, and of course, I cannot and will not not mention our YouTube channel. Please, we're trying to grow that area as much as we possibly can. Make sure you subscribe, like, and maybe even comment on something that you watched. We're dropping a lot of shorts there, reels, and stories. So make sure you go there, check us out, darkfringeradio.com, and of course, our YouTube site, Dark Fringe Radio. Yeah, please help us out. Really appreciate it. But we're going to get into our really exciting episode tonight of Dark Fringe Radio. Of course, we're going to be exploring the world of criminal defense with seasoned attorney right here in West Palm Beach, Florida. Our guest tonight is Mr. Brian Pakett, a dedicated and experienced criminal defense attorney who spent 20 years fighting for rights of individuals facing some of the toughest moments of their lives, from DUIs to drug offenses to series of felony charges. Attorney Pakett has seen it all and has built a reputation for providing strategic and aggressive defense for his clients that are in need. So, in this episode, we'll be discussing, what it takes to defend the accused, how Florida's unique laws impact criminal cases, and how some of the biggest misconceptions about criminal defense attorneys. So, this episode is really going to get into how, Attorney Pakett will share his insights on navigating the legal system, protecting your rights, what you should do if you ever find yourself in need of legal representation. And it's a really important podcast. And so whether you're curious about the legal process, you're passionate about justice, or just loved a good behind the scenes look at the courtroom, this is an episode for you that you don't want to miss. So let's welcome our guest, attorney Brian Pakett, and the screen goes.
Fringe Radio, your trusted source for the paranormal, conspiracy theory, and true crime.
Brian, thanks for coming on Dark Fringe Radio. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So, Brian, listen, we always get into the true crime stuff here, but it's usually, a crime that was committed, and we look back at the historical, what happened, breaking down the whole thing, but we never looked at these things from the criminal defense side, and that's where we kind of have you brought in here. And this is a very interesting opportunity because we never really look at it from the side. First off, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what led you to pursue this career in the criminal defense law? First off?
Sure. So to me, law was this was always law, right? Criminal defense was always law. Now you got to remember how old I am and when I grew up. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm 43 now, born in 81, but in 1994, I was 13, 14. Mm-hmm. All right. It sounds right. What was going on in 94, 95, 96? O.J. Simpson.
Yep.
Right. Who obviously just passed away. Mm-hmm. But I grew up in it, right? I always was fascinated by it. I watched every minute of that trial. I always wanted to talk to the proverbial bad guys, right? Yeah. That's what I like to do. I always want to know what really happened and sort of get the story. And I loved it. So that's probably what interested me the most in criminal law.
Hmm.
But criminal law is the fun part, right? I'm the cool guy to talk to at the cocktail parties because I got all
Of
the stories.
course. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting that you talked about it in this aspect because you started in New York. What made you take the path down here to West Palm? I mean, out of all the areas in all of the United States, what made you go from the Bronx to West Palm?
Sure. So I should tell you something really smart and inquisitive, but fact is my wife's from down here, but more importantly, it's paradise.
Yes.
Okay, what's not to
There you
like?
go.
So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
weather and
Yeah.
like I said, my wife's family, but more importantly, I think I said this once before, but the weather, beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I get it. And so you've been practicing law for over 15 years now, right? Is that correct? Am I correct on that?
Approaching 20. I think it's
20
been
now.
I think it's been 19 years. I was admitted to the bar in New Jersey in 2006. So it's been about 18 years.
So how has your approach changed from Brian Pakett starting off first year and now Brian Pakett 20 years later? What has changed your approach? What was your approach then? Has it changed now when it comes to defending clients? Curious.
Experience. I mean, the thing is I had the benefit, the privilege of, I'm very lucky. I was trained by, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best criminal defense lawyers and his people as well as his daughter, um, in the world, right? He's one of the most famous people you'll know. And he took me under his wing. He showed me everything, more by trial and error, no pun intended. But I watched him. I watched him try murder cases. I watched him try, handle celebrity cases, and I got to experience it. And at first he always likes to say if he was on this, he would make fun of me how I used to sweat and would be nervous and everything else. And just from learning and trying my own cases, you gain confidence. And the thing is, in my business, in my world, you have to be confident.
Yeah.
Why? Because people are looking to me. My lives are figuratively in their hands, or in my hands, right?
Hmm.
So when you're in trouble, when you're charged with a crime and face potentially life in prison or death penalty or something along those lines, do you want the guy who comes in and is like, wow, man? No, you want a guy who's going to stand up there and is going to give you the confidence,
Right.
not only give
Yeah.
you the confidence, but is
Mhm.
speaking confidently to a jury who's going to believe what I have to say, whether it's true or not.
Mhm.
But it's confidence. That's what's changed me. And that confidence comes from my tutelage and who I was trained by.
Yeah. No, I totally understand that. Yeah, of course. And the experiences, the 20 years experience, I mean, that alone says a lot. So let's talk about some of the types of criminal cases that you handle. Let's more frequently in this area of West Palm Beach. Are there any cases unique to our area in specific?
Um, so I do a lot of violent stuff. I do a lot of
Okay.
murders, do a lot of attempted murders.
Okay.
That's just sort of how my client base has come to be. That's not necessarily unique to this particular area. There's violent crime everywhere. We're in this country, and New York, obviously, where I'm from. But you kind of grow a little bit of a niche just by way of practice and repeat clients. And I do a lot of violent stuff. I have currently, I think, 10 open homicide cases. So I do a lot of
Wow.
homicides. I try a lot of homicides. If the person who's injured is not deceased, then I typically do that too. So you're talking about attempted murders and aggravated batteries, aggravated battery with a firearm, that type of stuff. But I do everything. I mean, I do your DUIs, I do everything. So, but
Nice.
yes, my specialty, so to speak, and I'm not allowed to use that word with the Florida bar, but my
Right.
specialty, if you will, is murder. And
Yeah. Yeah.
murder used to always say murder cases are great because there's one less witness. I
Mm.
guess I got to use that as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, I get that. I get that. And it's interesting to me. I've always it's easy to think about a trial and the whole process from a prosecutory side, right? Versus on a criminal side, it's a different mindset. Like, how do you build trust and rapport with your clients, especially when they're dealing with the most difficult times of their life, right? They're facing either going to jail or you know what I mean, or being a free person. How do you build that trust, that rapport with the client?
Reputation, it starts with reputation, right? And
Right.
it's if you have to have done it before because the client's never going to trust you. They're always going to say things like, oh, you work for the state or you work for the prosecution, that type of
Right.
stuff. But more so, I the way I do it is with honesty, right? Is if you listen to the bullshit that your clients feed you and the garbage that your clients tell you, they know what's bullshit and what's not bullshit, right? So if you call them out on it sometimes, or if you put it a certain way, for instance, a client will tell me something and he wants to rely on a defense such as, I don't know, self-defense or something along those lines. If the facts don't lend themselves to a self-defense argument, you have to tell the client, look, this is your life. We can go to trial and I'm good at what I do and I can argue to a jury. But if I'm arguing that to a jury, if I'm arguing self-defense to a jury when there's no evidence of self-defense, this is your life. You're going to lose, right? I'm good at what I do, but I don't have magic pixie dust. And, so that helps build confidence with the client because the client almost internally said, wow, this lawyer really is not buying the bullshit, that I'm spewing now. A lot of times it doesn't happen that way. And they want you to, argue the stuff that they want you to do. And from my experience, I can tell them a jury's never buying that, right? Now, sometimes you don't have a choice. I have a couple murder cases now which revolve around phone records. Actually, the majority of my murder cases now are involving phone records, and the only evidence that the state has is these cell phone tower pinging and everything else, and cell phone data from the actual phone that puts them on the scene. And you'll hear it if you come to one of my trials, is the argument that I will always make is just because a phone is here, right, doesn't mean that I'm necessarily behind that phone. It doesn't mean that my client's behind that phone. Is the jury going to buy that? You tell me. I mean, I don't ever leave my phone. I don't think you ever leave your phone. But if I was going to do something bad, given my experience, I know I should probably leave my phone at home.
Right.
So,
absolutely.
But it's all about experience. And in my opinion, the way you get a client to trust you is, first of all, clients rarely ever trust you, regardless of who you are. But the way you get them to trust them is to sort of call them out on their bullshit and just shoot them as straight as you can. No pun intended.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. I can see that. That makes perfect sense. So let's get into some specifics here. So, are there any Florida laws, since we're talking, Florida here, or legal nuances that, significantly impact criminal cases, that are handled compared to like other states? Are there
mandatory minimums are brutal. What a mandatory minimum is it's just like it sounds, is what you would be facing. The minimum you can face if you are convicted, not to mention here in Florida, unlike in some other states, we have what we call min-mans, which is requirement to serve. So a lot of people will say things such as, oh, well, he got 60 years, but he's really only going to do 40, right? Here in Florida, there are certain crimes. There's mandatory minimum time that you have to serve. The statute says you cannot be released before a certain date. Now, we don't have parole here in Florida, in the state court in Florida. So, for instance, in New York, you could be convicted of murder and get 25 to life. What does 25 to life mean? That means you go before the parole board. You go before the parole board after 25 years, and the parole board could decide to parole you. Here in Florida, we don't have that. So life means life. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We have the death penalty here, but I would tell you that specifically as it relates to drug cases, our drug laws here in Florida, at least in my opinion, are extremely punitive. If you get caught with trafficking fentanyl, a certain amount of weight of fentanyl, it's automatically called trafficking. Okay, now you hear the word trafficking and you think like, oh my God, this is Pablo Escobar. It's not the case. It's all about weight. I have a client now who's charged with buying 10,000 pills of fentanyl. Truth be told, was he going to move it? Maybe, but it was for personal use. He's charged with trafficking fentanyl. You know what his mandatory minimum is? 25 years. That's a minimum. Okay. Wow. They found a firearm in the house, and the prosecutor has told me, if you go to trial in this case, I'm elevating the charges, and trafficking fentanyl while armed is mandatory life.
Wow.
Life for drugs.
Just because he had that gun. Right.
But forget the gun for a second. 25 years on a first arrest for a narcotic. Yeah, now, again, if you told me he made multiple sales and you told me that there was extenuating circumstances, that this is a guy who's, trafficking. I hear the word trafficking, you think major drug pusher, like El Chapo type of stuff. No, I mean, it's about the weight, and it's again, you'd be kind of stupid to go to trial on a drug case because of that. But I think in Florida, the uniqueness is we have very high punishment here. The only thing that we're relatively lenient on firearms compared to New York, obviously, and other places. But it's scary because, like I said, drugs are treated very seriously here, at least in my.
That's what I've seen, and living here and just knowing the things and trials throughout the years, that's exactly what I've seen. So going on that, the whole drug scene and talking about that, West Palm Beach is known for its very vibrant, tourist nightlife. Do you see a pattern in those types of cases that arise from this lifestyle? Do you think it's goes hand in hand? Because you have the great weather, the great nightlife, all that stuff. Do you think that the nefarious side just comes along with it?
We're not Miami. Miami, because you're a port city. I mean, we're a port city here, but Miami is known more for its nightlife and cocaine and all that type of stuff and party drugs. Sure. I mean, it's here. It's, we have ports everywhere. So boating and trafficking, so to speak, is something. To get to the Bahamas, as I'm sure know, I don't know if listeners know, but to get to the Bahamas here, you go by boat, it takes you 2 hours. Right. Yeah. So, but if you get into that realm, then it's not statewide, then it's feds, and then it's a little bit different. So I would push back on that a little bit. I don't think that I find more drug cases in urban environments, and West Palm Beach really get there, but it's not super urban. I don't think that the vacation lifestyle. You would think it's a good question because we are a vacation spot, right? Spring break, stuff. But that's 100%. A lot of it happens, but that's low level stuff. I mean, that's possession of cocaine and marijuana, obviously, and ecstasy, right, and even fentanyl. But it's, fentanyl's a problem. Fentanyl is, as I'm sure is a problem. But I would say not really. Believe it or not, I would actually push back and say that despite who we are as a state, as a place where a destination paradise, as I said before, no, I wouldn't say it's any different than New York in terms of drug consumption.
It's so weird, because drugs come in and out of like not lifestyle, but maybe just like maybe importance or maybe just cool thing of the week. It goes, there's phases. The 80s was all about cocaine, and then the 60s and 70s was about marijuana. You know what I mean? And things go back in and out of phase. I don't understand how anybody could do fentanyl in this day and age or do cocaine with fentanyl out there. You know what I mean? It blows my mind. You know what I mean?
I should know more than I do, if I'm being honest with you, about the narcotics. From what I've been told, from what I understand, it's because it's synthetic and it's something that you can make. And I've been told that it's made in China, and it's almost probably streetwise cheaper, whereas cocaine is an actual plant and it's actually something that I couldn't say it for sure, but sure. I mean, well, what they're doing, I have, friends of friends who were telling me about, you can't even do recreational coke. I've never done a drug in my life. Okay. But, they've told me you can't even do recreational. What they sell is like test kits for people who do recreational cocaine.
Wow.
Just
that's crazy.
Fentanyl. And they said that like law enforcement is handing them out because people are dying. Right. Yeah. Now, I don't know why a dealer would want fentanyl in their cocaine. I'm not a drug user, so I can't tell you.
Yeah,
but
you would want to
killing your customer, right? Right. What are you doing?
You're killing
my customers kill people. My customers kill people.
Right.
Right. So I don't kill my customers. That's a joke. But I don't know. It must be something potent in it that creates better high, that makes it more addictive. I don't know.
Yeah, that's crazy. One question I wanted to ask you, and when as soon as the request came in of you coming on the podcast and everything, and one of the first things that I thought of was, there's a very controversial law that we have here in Florida. Whether you want to say it's controversial or not, but it's a stand your ground law. How does that particular law, play into criminal defense cases, and what's your perspective on it?
So I do a lot of stand your ground hearings. Stand your ground hearing in a practical sense is a very mini trial. It's a very mini trial that you get to put before the judge. The judge makes the decision. And it's great for us criminal defense lawyers because you get to test your facts against the judge, and the judge, could rule in your favor. And obviously, if you lose, it's not as if your client is convicted. You just go to trial. I just had a murder trial, which we had a stand your ground hearing, and that was the trial. I think we did a great job. I was surprised the judge denied it. It was denied. Okay. In that case, my client was alleged to have essentially, not alleged, he shot and killed a man who was in a car with his wife at about 4 a.m. with his pants down. Obviously, the defense and the prosecution had differencing of opinions as to what actually happened. Our position was that this guy had a firearm. It's a fascinating case. There was a firearm found on the deceased lap in the car. Okay, my client's DNA was found nowhere near or inside the car, was swabbed anywhere, nor was my blood found. Now, there's different evidence, and this is a whole nother podcast that I could talk just about this case, but your good stuff, right? There's blood spatter that was relevant. There's DNA. There's, my position has always been that their position was that my client planted the gun. Problem was, for me, there was blood everywhere in the car. I mean, everywhere, with the exception of on the gun. Wow. So that's why their theory was that gun could not have been in there. But my theory of the case was that this guy was bleeding so badly that the blood actually squirted out like a fountain over the gun, such that, great case. Okay, my client ended up getting what I would deem a very favorable deal. Basically, he got 20 years. But that was stand your ground, right? So we went in and we had the hearing, and the judge denied it. Now, a lot of judges love my judges, but they're sometimes afraid. They'd rather a jury do it than the judge themselves. They're nominated, they're elected. Judge quits, but judges do it. I know lawyers who've won them. So in a practical sense, I view them as a practice trial. Because remember, you can still assert. Stand your ground is a very nice way of saying self-defense. Okay. It's virtually the same. People don't understand. It's the same. Okay. Obviously Trayvon Martin is the sort of seminal case on it. I've had cases that were like the one I just told you was much better than Trayvon Martin's case. Or what is his name? I forget
the individual,
the defendant. Name escapes me. But I mean, I don't view it as a controversial law. It was just self-defense. Now, it's controversial in the sense that here in Florida, and I say this tongue in cheek, but compared to New York, in Florida, you can defend yourself against a felon. Okay, in New York, you really can't protect your property, use deadly force to protect property. Here in Florida, it's technical, it's not actual, but you can. Right. And here we say in Florida, and I always joke around with friends and say, someone comes on my property, you will have to shoot. So that's where it gets controversial. But I'm never going to use it in that manner, only because it's a losing argument. But when I just got consulted today on a murder case, which you're going to have stand your ground hearing. I have a road rage case. Thank God no one was hurt or no one was killed and no one was really hurt. And it's another one where I thought we won the stand your ground hearing, and the judge's opinion was, I'm denying your stand your ground, but I'm warning you, prosecutors, a jury's probably going to acquit her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, she didn't say that was
so basically kicking the can down the road, basically,
exactly.
Obviously.
And saying it's about reasonableness. I mean, that's an interesting case too. But my client was actually not the road rage person. Person got out of their car, banged on my client's window. I'm screaming at her, "You don't know what the hell you're doing. You don't know how to drive." My client with her fiance in the car tried to drive away, trapped in traffic, turned and fired 3 times into the car with the guy with his kid in the car.
Wow.
They weren't hurt. I mean, the glass broke and everything else, but our argument at trial will be what she saw in her rearview mirror. She looked in her rearview mirror. She saw him leaning into the car. Why was he leaning into the car? He was leaning into the car because he left his door open when he got out of the car in the middle of traffic to go yell at my client, and some stuff had fallen out of the car. So he leaned into the car. The testimony was he leans into the car to go get papers and put them outside the car and put them back in his car. She sees him leaning into a car, thinks he's grabbing a firearm. She's trapped, so she shoots 3 times.
Wow. Yeah.
Yep. 20 years
That,
if she's convicted. Yep. 20 years.
man. And it's just like, what would you do in that split second, that millisecond of just decision making? You know, that's all you
Right.
have at
And
that
you
moment.
ask, well, why does she have a gun? She's a security guard. She's just got off work. She had
Oh, well,
you
so
know, but
there's a reasonable explanation, obviously, for that.
so I
Yeah.
think, and I think a jury
Right.
will buy it. But again, you're willing to roll the dice. It's 20 years of prison. That's a long time. 20
That's
years.
a long,
I haven't
yeah.
even been practicing law 20 years. It's 20 years is a long time. And, you know,
Yeah. And the mandatory, you have to do what, like 85%? Is that what usually it is? Like 88?
again, it goes back to what we said before. If
Yeah.
she's charged with discharging a firearm, no, it's day to day, 20 years. You do
Wow.
20 years. So, that's why we're trying to negotiate and work something out. The
Yeah.
judge's comments, I think, were important about it, but it's a tough spot to be in because, it's,
Yeah.
again, I think her actions were reasonable. She discharged the firearm and shot into a guy's car with his kid, a 16-year-old kid in the car. But
Hmm. Yeah.
thus is my job and why it's stressful.
Yeah, no, again, yeah, it's a stressful job. I mean, again, it's not a job that most people, it's a thankless job, I guess, in a lot of ways, because, unless you're of course, the person who's being, defended. But, you know, again, can you walk me through the typical process of defending somebody like who's accused of something like this? I mean, at first, I'm sure you do an interview with them and go through the series of events, and then what's the whole process like when you're trying to defend somebody like this?
Sure. So, I mean, you have to understand the business side of it, right? I'm a private lawyer, so
Right.
I'm paid. So,
Yes.
I like to think I'm good at what I do, so I'm not cheap, right? So, a lot of people come to me, you know, knowing that there's a lot of expectations when people come to me. So the first thing that I do is beat them, is have a conversation with family before I even speak to the client. Typically, if they're incarcerated, I will sometimes go see them, but regardless, and basically explain to them the process. And I will also be brutally honest. A lot of lawyers in my shoes don't do that, and it's crucial to do it. Why? I don't need a client mad at me. Okay. I don't need to talk about returning money and fees and everything else. And a lot of clients, especially lately, have this belief, as I said before, that I have magic fixing. As
Yeah.
soon as Brian Pakett comes into the case, quick Brian, call Brian, right? That I can make an offer go from 15 years with the public defender's office to 5 years, right? Or that I can just make the case go away. It doesn't work that throw money at the problem is what everybody always says. So you have to be upfront with the client in terms of expectations. I tell every client I have, I cannot make promises or guarantees as to results. And a lot of clients will say, okay, you charge me 80 grand. What can you guarantee me? And I walk away. I say nothing.
Mm,
It's hard to walk away from a nice fee like that, but at the same
of
time,
course.
it's you have to be
You're,
honest. What a lot of
yeah.
lawyers will do, not in ones that I know, but some will oh, it's no problem, pay me this and I'll get this dismissed, or I'll do this or I'll do
Right.
that, right? And you
Right.
can't do that. I'm not the judge. I'm certainly not the prosecutor, thank God, and I'm not the jury, right? So I
Hmm.
can't tell what a client is going to have. So we have that conversation. I review what we call here the probable cause affidavit. So essentially what the allegations are. I go through it. I review it. I then typically will speak to the client. You want to know, does the client tell you he did it or she did it? Rarely. They don't. You can
Rarely
tell.
happens. No.
Rarely that they ask, that they tell you, yeah, I fucking killed that motherfucker, right? That's not
Right.
usually what happens. It's always a story about, or
Right.
and we if you've done this long enough, when the client's lying and telling the truth.
Hmm.
But we talk about it. We talk about what the defenses will be. I explain to them in brutal honesty what I will do. What I do, sort of my selling point for a lot of clients, is availability. Is to let the clients know that we're in this together and that I've got you. I've got your back. They're scared. My clients are scared shitless, right?
Of course.
Most of
Yeah.
them are in jail and they're scared, right? And they
Yeah.
look to me, as we said before regarding confidence, they look to me as their superhero, right? And
Hmm.
I'm here to save the day. Now, again, I'm not going to guarantee you I'm going to save the day, but we're going to go down fighting if we're going down. I'm not here to lose. Okay. As Murray used to say, I'm here to win.
Hmm.
Okay. And so we explain it that way. We talk about it. I'll know the judge. I'll know the prosecutor. It's local.
Right.
And we'll explain it that way, and then we talk money, and then off we go. And then what'll happen is we fight the case, I fight the case, and then if the case doesn't go the way the client wants, the client gets mad, client screams at me, and that's how. I'm kidding.
But it seems like that's what it is, right?
It does happen, more often than you think, but
Right.
that's the nature of it, right? You get some clients whose expectations are, which is also why I'm very careful what I tell clients, because they'll go, "Oh, you told me when I first met you," that type of thing. But that's why you have to be honest. If you lie, you're going to get eaten alive in this business.
Yeah.
You're just going to get
don't give high expectations. Yeah.
And the thing is, it's reputation. Sometimes the majority of these people who are charged with crimes that they likely have done, or that there's likely a lot of evidence against, they just want you to be real with them. Because if you're not, they're going to hire you, and then they're going to hate you. And that's where reputation comes in, right? Mm-hmm. I like to think that my clients, like me and refer me to other people because I'm honest. And I tell them the way it is, whether they like to hear it or not. It's the way it goes.
Yeah, no, I understand. It must be difficult. I mean, I couldn't even imagine, being in your position. What a difficult position it must be. How do you handle when you get a case and just the odds are just completely stacked against you? You know what I mean? You got A, B, C, D, E, and F. Just you feel like you have no way out. How do you deal with that? Like as an attorney, like I'm sure you're honest with your client. You tell them, hey, this is what's going on, but how do you deal with that, professionally?
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
When you say the cards are stacked against me, right? I'm not trying it. I need to win the hand. Okay. Mm-hmm. However, I tell this to clients, I had a client on a murder case said to me, his mother said to me, can you beat this case? And I looked at her and I said, define what the word beat means, because I can define it a lot of different ways. Beating this case could mean trying to make sure that your son doesn't get the death penalty. Beating this case could mean making sure that your client comes home to you one day and doesn't do life in prison. Or beating this case could mean just what it sounds, beating the case, walking my son out. Okay. Right. On that particular case, it was a murder case, and the public defender, who will go nameless, saw my client before he was ever my client and looked him in the eye and said, you're getting life, right? Okay. That's a good story. I mean, that case, wow. They offered me 20 years. Okay. Mm-hmm. And my client looked at me and he says to me, I said to him, take the deal. I know the facts. It's on video. It's a shooting. Take the deal. Mm-hmm. He said to me, you're a beast, Brian. You're going to beat this case. I said, take the deal. This guarantees you're home before the age of 40. I'll bring him on this damn podcast. He'll tell this exact story. So wow. I said to him, take the deal. He goes, Brian, you're a beast. I saw you at the Arthur hearing. You're going to win. I said, we lost the Arthur hearing, right?
Right.
He
still had that confidence in you. Yeah.
He saw the fight for me in the bond hearing and saying, I saw you at that hearing, you're going to win. I said, we lost that hearing. You don't have a bond.
Right.
He says, Brian, try the case. I said, okay. Tried the case. You know what? Usually that story, William, ends with the client getting life in prison. This happens to have a happy ending. The jury was out 45 minutes. He was acquitted of all counts and is now home doing very well. Okay.
Wow.
But when you say, to answer your question, stacked against you, I mean, I don't particularly love drug cases. I find drug cases to be cases that I look at and say, figuratively, that things are stacked against me. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Because, with Stacey Richmond, Murray's daughter, and I used to always joke, she had a client once who had drugs taped to his leg, and he was like, they're not mine. And she was like, what's not yours? Like, that's when the facts are stacked against you. But to me, it's never they're stacked against you enough that there's not something that can be done, whether that be get them a lesser plea, whether it be, it's very rare that you have a case. It happens. Mm-hmm. Okay. Or you have a murder case, and in fact, I can't get into that because it's still open. But I had a prosecutor who I was on the case. I got off the case. The prosecutor told me this is the worst case I've ever seen. And she said, well, you should be very thankful, and I'm happy because I like your bride. You're not on this case. There was no winning. There's no winning the case. The family, the client believes that they're going to do something. There's no winning. It's on video. I just told you I beat a murder case on video. Different. There's a different video. This is bad. Bad. So what do I do in that situation? It's the same thing I told you before, is I have to be brutally honest. I even would consider turning it down, but I like money. I love money. So as long as I'm upfront and I will charge a fee that's high, and we'll explain to them the odds of winning. Yeah. You never know what'll happen.
You never know what'll happen.
But they're tough. They're very, I will say, to make a point, they're very rare. Yeah. You can watch Murray's videos. He'll talk to you about a story about a guy who stabbed the guy 17 times, and he convinced the jury that the guy ran into the knife 17 times. I mean, like, it's
How do you
just when
somebody?
you think cards cases, remember the state is a burden, and that's a very high burden. It's not as easy as you may think, even when something's on video. I liken it to the first scene of Better Call Saul. Love that show. Okay. Yeah. Very first scene, he says, Saul gets up there and he says, my client is not guilty. I'm going to tell you why he's not guilty. You hear all the evidence, you're going to find that he's not guilty. And the way that you're going to know he's not guilty, he's saying no, right? He said nothing. He's just repeating himself over and over again because he's got nothing. Right. And then it's fictitious, but the prosecutor gets up, stands up there, doesn't say a word after he's done, and pushes play on the video. And it's like I don't know what it was, like with something like grotesque that this guy was doing in a classroom. Like that sometimes does happen. That's when the cards are stacked against you, where you got nothing.
You got nothing.
But it's so very rare.
Gotcha. Well, that really kind of it touches on a subject that I was very curious about, the whole plea deal situation. When you're going back and forth, with the prosecution, and you're going back and forth, and you're working on these deals. How does that negotiation play into this whole thing? I mean,
it's all it is. That's what it is.
It's all it is, right? It's a negotiation at the end of the day, right?
I've long said in civil cases you have what's called mediation. I've long said that they should have mediation in criminal cases. It's a battle. I mean, it's a battle in terms of you get very tough prosecutors, some who know that their cases are really strong. And, I'm dealing with one right now. It's a murder case, and give you their specs, but their position, I won't say their position is I'm asking for 25 years, and their position is, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 40. And their position is, okay, I said 40 is a long time. 40.
Yeah.
And they say, okay, better than life. Right. So it's tough when the cards are stacked against you. And then it's the other way where I have a rape case right now that's, the facts are on our side. Like, the case for the state is, in my opinion, crap. So I go to them and I express what we have and use my leverage and go to, that's how it is. It's like you see on TV. That's how it is. And, here in Florida, we have what's called a criminal score sheet. So that gives you your minimums and tells you what the minimum you face. That's a big
I've heard about that.
Yeah. So that's big in what's used in negotiations, because, if they score a certain level, that's the mandatory minimum they have to get. Now, your other problem is, not to get too into the weeds here, is that you have some judges in our county who won't accept a plea under score. And I've seen it. I've seen it very recently where a judge declined a plea, which bothers me only in the sense that I'm a defense lawyer. I know the strengths of my case. The prosecutor's office knows the strengths of their case. The judge doesn't know our case as well as we do. So if we come to an agreement, why are you intervening?
Right.
But I've seen it. I saw it on a murder case. The judge intervened, declined a plea, and the defendant was acquitted.
Wow.
So,
wow.
It's tough for the victim's family to now know that the person's on the street when there was a deal. But, the judges also have, not to fault them if they're listening, I understand, and they want justice. And, sometimes you get good deals because witnesses aren't coming forward. Judges don't like that.
Right.
Prosecutors don't like that. It's not that the person didn't do it. It's that the evidence is weak, this and that. So it's tough. But It's like you
Yeah.
think. I mean, plea bargaining is just that. It's, it helps to have a good reputation. And, Murray used to always say that the trial is the war.
Mhm.
And if you're a big, strong guy, you don't necessarily want to go to war. Right? And if you
Right.
win cases, they know, you know what, Pakett's a pretty decent trial lawyer, or, whomever
Yeah.
is a pretty
Yeah.
good trial lawyer. That's leverage that can be used. That's part of sometimes why someone will hire me or
Mhm.
my colleagues who are real good because they don't want to lose also.
Right. Yeah, I get that. Um, you talked about a bunch of cases already. I mean, but
Mhm.
maybe without revealing too much detail, can you maybe share a particularly memorable or unique case that you worked on that, that was so unique that, just stuck in your mind throughout the years?
Tell you the coolest case I've ever done. I represented DMX at may he rest in peace, at
Mhm.
a hearing in Yonkers. He was being held without child support. That was really cool. I mean, I was a big DMX fan growing up and in college.
Yeah.
That was really cool to argue to a judge. Judge, talking about him performing and saying if you keep him in jail, he can't perform. If he's not
Right.
performing, he's not paying child support. That was cool.
Yeah.
The celebrities are cool. I do a lot of NFL player work. I do a lot of rappers. I got to tell you something, William. I'm getting because I was very big into rap and hip hop, and I recently represented a young, wonderful kid, really nice young man, and had no idea who he was. And I mean, not really into rap music anymore, but still, thought I followed it. And I had
Yeah.
clients of mine be like, "You represent this kid. You represent Boss Man D-Lo."
Ah,
Had no
yeah.
had no idea who he was.
Yeah.
Nice kid, nice family. Spoke to his
Yeah.
agent. And they were like, everybody in my world is an up and coming rapper. Everybody says it.
Yeah.
They're all rappers. So when they
Yeah.
said it, I'm like, okay. And I should have known when I got a call from the agent, and he's big time now.
Yeah.
But
He is.
memorable in terms of non-celebrity stuff.
Yeah.
Um, it's so hard. I mean, my first case here in Florida when I moved down was a rape case. My client looked exactly like Steve Urkel.
Are you serious?
Yeah, he was a
Jaleel White.
so as soon as I met the kid, I knew he didn't do what the state said he did, and I knew that a
Right.
jury would know that he was alleged to have basically forcibly had sex with his girlfriend who had broken up with. If you met the
Ah,
kid for 2 seconds, you would know this kid couldn't break a pencil if he tried, right? So
right.
like
Right. Yeah.
again, another success story. Scary. He was facing a minimum of 8 years at that time, and
Wow.
that was memorable. And why is it memorable? Because I always say the scariest cases we have are cases that you truly believe your client did not do it. I
Hmm.
know that kid didn't do it. I know he didn't. Um,
Hmm.
those are scary. Um, but
Yeah, because you're
they're all
emotionally
memorable.
involved as well, right? I guess, right?
Excuse me.
Are you emotionally involved as well when you start to feel that way? Is that why it's harder?
So my wife will tell you, I always say I don't get emotionally involved.
Right.
Murray used to always say, if you want to get emotionally involved, get a dog. But you do. You don't. It's not. You don't take it personal, but you do grow to like
Right.
it. You do. You know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
how do you like your clients when you know they did bad things? First of all, I don't know they did bad things. Second of
Right.
all, people are human, right? Like there's, just like Murray used to always say that my job is to convince a jury on a murder case that the guy deserved it, right?
Mhm.
Just remember, when every murder case that you have and every violent case that you have, I'm not saying that they deserved it, but they're not the best of people either. Okay. And,
Right.
this is sort of a lot of the stuff I do is gang related. It's gang banging. And I know people. I have a murder case now where my client's alleged to, with four other guys, to have killed the guy. Why
Wow.
did they kill the guy? Allegedly, because they believe he killed their friend. So,
Wow.
that type of stuff. But in
Yeah.
terms
A
of
lot of
memorable
hearsay.
cases, I get asked all the time, yeah, any interesting cases? I'm like, guys, I'm a criminal defense lawyer who does all of my
Yeah.
cases are memorable, and all of my
Yeah.
cases are. I do DUIs. Those are not memorable. Okay, they're
Right.
boring. They're all the same.
Yeah.
Um, so that.
Yeah. I get it. A two-parter, real quick. Um, First off, what are some of the most common misconceptions about criminal defense attorneys that you would like to address first off? And then secondly, how do you respond to critics who believe defending someone accused of a crime is unethical?
Um, most people think that us criminal defense lawyers, we somehow, some way, condone the alleged behavior of our
Yep.
clients. You know, I've often said to prosecutors who are screaming at me about what my client did, I didn't do it.
I didn't
Right?
do it right.
It wasn't me. Like, just because I defend somebody doesn't mean that I support what they're alleged to have done, whether it be something stupid, right? Like whether it be political. You know, I represented a girl who was wrongfully accused of writing a letter to somebody who's a Trump supporter saying, if you don't take that flag down, I'm going to kill you. Like, that doesn't make me a Trump supporter or anti-Trump supporter. Like, my point is that I don't condone murder. I don't condone street violence. I don't condone road rage. I don't condone any of that. And that's a very common misconception. Well, how can you represent that piece of shit? I was playing golf once with a guy, and I represented a guy who was alleged to have defrauded a lot of people in cars. Anyone watching this probably knows the case. You can Google it. My client very, very hated, still hated to this day. And I was playing golf with a guy. He loves my stories. He loves to ask me, just like you're asking me. So he asked me, what's, you know, give me a good case. So I told him about this case I was on trial with. He ended up pleading guilty. And all of a sudden he stops in his tracks. And, are you talking about, and he mentions the guy's name. I said, yeah. Curses me out 15 minutes.
Wow.
You represent him. He cursed out my wife. He did this. He did that. I said, again, I'm like, I'm just doing my job, man. Like, I'm not, you know, so I just understand that I don't necessarily even like some of the people that I represent. That would be the misconception. Or that would be the misconception. What was the second question as to
the second question is,
say,
that's unethical, right?
There's nothing unethical about making sure that the state attorney's office meets their burden. You have a constitutional right? And I'm not a tree hugger. I'm not a guy who's going to sit here and, you know, fighting for I'm not like that. But at the same time, like, you know, you have to understand, my job is not to prove guilt or innocence. That's the state's job. That's their job. My job is to make sure that they hold on to their burden. Okay. Well, what about the fact that you know that you represented people who've actually killed people who are now on the streets, and that's because of you and your work? Okay. I don't look at it that way. I mean, I do, and I look at it as I won. Okay, and I beat you. But at the same time, if I could have proven the murder case I just told you I won, I could have proven that case, knowing the facts of the case and knowing what I was going to argue, obviously, could have proved that case in 15 minutes. Okay, why? Wow. Because I say that now, it's not easy to prove a case. Please understand that. But it's their burden. It's their job. It's our Constitution. It's what the law says. And if I don't look at it like I did it. I look at it as they failed. And that's what I would say to those people is, you know, and what would you say to the people who I've represented who cases I've lost? Right. And my client's not guilty. Right. Okay. Well, then did I?
Yeah, I get it. You know, and I kind of akin it to like, you know, a surgeon in a hospital, like, okay, a person comes in and has to have surgery. He doesn't know if they're a criminal or, you know, a person who's innocent. You know what I mean? They're going to try to save the person's life. That's their job.
Remember, I'm not necessarily, yes, it does happen that we go to trial and I'm arguing my client didn't do it. There's a lot of times I'm not arguing my client didn't do it. Sometimes I'm arguing my client did it, but he was justified. Sometimes I'm arguing pre-negotiations about what's called mitigation to suggest that, it was provoked. So, you know, in the cases of the cards stacked against you cases, it's very clear the client did it. Okay, so you do my job, which was to make sure that the case is handled properly, that my client gets a fair trial. Excuse me, and that's my job.
Yeah,
I don't lose sleep at night over that type of stuff. No, the only thing I lose sleep at night, I lose sleep at night over one thing and one thing only, and that's when I know when someone is either being offered a very bad deal, or if I believe they didn't do it.
Right, I get that.
Let me tell you one more thing.
Yeah,
I sleep just fine.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Brian, a couple last questions I want to ask you before I let you go. Are there any trends or changes in the criminal law that you're noticing in Florida that, you know, that are changing, and how are you adapting to them? I know the laws are always constantly changing. You know, there's a lot of laws have been changing as of recent. You know, how do you adapt to all that stuff? Are you got to keep tabs on everything constantly? Like, what do you do?
You do, but I mean, there's new legislation regarding bond and bail and everything else. And now what they're starting to do is they're seeking pretrial detention a lot on drug cases that they never did before, meaning someone being held no bond and will fight the case from the inside. The biggest trends I would tell you are twofold. One is with marijuana, the other is with firearms. As I'm sure you know, your carry concealed firearms no longer illegal.
Yep.
DeSantis changed the law there. So essentially, the only thing you're not allowed to do in terms of possessing a firearm here is you can't be a
Being a
convicted
felon,
felon
right?
or underage.
Right.
Correct. Those are the two
Yeah.
reasons. So those trends are interesting.
What trend with marijuana in particular?
So the legalization of marijuana, it is not legal. Well, it is becoming, there's medicinal marijuana, which is legal. And the question is, this is very fascinating when people look at it, is it's always used as a pretext to search. The car smelled like marijuana. Therefore, we could search, and they find guns, and then they bodies, and then they find whatever it is they find. If
Oh,
it's
Lord.
legal,
Yeah.
I always argue that it's actually bad for my business, because it should no longer be a pretext to stop just because you smell marijuana in a car, a person. However, the caveat to that is alcohol is legal. If you have beer in your car, you are pulled over and it smells like alcohol, make an argument that that's a reason enough for them to search your car, because they're going to arrest you for DUI, go change it into a valid arrest. But trending, if marijuana is completely legalized, where it's not even illegal to consume it and drive, it's going to change our world. I mean, and then the other thing is AI, but that's a conversation.
Yeah. Well,
we saw
the market took a hit yesterday with that, huh?
I
Wow.
was just saying to my brother-in-law, I was at Disney World this weekend, and
Yeah.
I think probably not my lifetime, but eventually you're not going to need Brian Pakett anymore. You're going to push a button, and someone's going to argue the murder case.
Jeez.
He's going to argue it. That's going to be.
I don't think that'll ever happen, though. I really don't, because there's something of a human attachment when it comes to something like that. When you're conveying something like that of that nature, there's like what you said. How
you juries.
Yeah. Wow. That's a whole nother thing.
Then it's
yeah. What keeps you motivated, Brian?
Money.
You know what I mean? Okay. That's what I thought. That's what I thought.
To be honest with you, I really am passionate about what I do. I love to fight for clients. I love to scream and yell at juries. I love to scream and yell at judges and everybody else. I do enjoy screaming and yelling, as my wife can
attest.
But I would be disingenuous if I didn't say that, the successful criminal defense lawyers in the world, Murray Richmond being one of them, Roy Black, whomever, they do well. And I'm in a business, right? And it is a business. That's what it is. And a lot of young lawyers don't realize that. I'm motivated. I want to be the guy, right? The guy that people will pay the $1 million fees to bring me in because I'm the guy, right? And I'm getting there. And but I don't have a better answer than what keeps me motivated is money and taking care of my family and living a good life.
Of course. Brian, if anybody was ever in need of your services, and I would love to just know you as a friend and never know you professionally.
Yeah. I'm like the dentist. Nobody wants to see me.
Right? Yeah. How can they get a hold of you? What's the best way?
Google me. I'm on the benches in town. My nickname is Quick Crying Cold Brian. It's a play off of Don't Worry Murray. Okay. Don't Worry Murray taught me everything. So I'm Quick Brian Cold Brian. You could just Google me. It comes up. 561-318-0531 is my phone number. I'm everywhere. You'll see me on the internet, my social media. It's there. It's nowadays, William, it's not hard to find me.
That is so true, right?
I always tell people, as far as my last name, Pakett, it's like a packet of sugar, but spelled differently. So, I'm really not hard to find. And I'm happy to talk to anybody. I do consultations for free. So you can call me up. We can have a chat. It's all free of charge.
That's awesome. Last question for you before I let you go, Brian. Favorite criminal defense movie versus, let's do it, My Cousin Vinny or The Devil's Advocate? Which one?
All right. You happen to pick the movie that I hate the most, which is The Devil's Advocate. And The Devil's Advocate, because at the end of The Devil's Advocate, the criminal defense lawyer is the devil. Okay. Yes. So that's My Cousin Vinny is a tremendously good movie. It is tremendously accurate. It is awesome. Yes. In my world, in my peers, we all love My Cousin Vinny. Okay. That's an easy one. Give me a harder one.
I know, right? Do you have any other maybe movies that you would put in?
Better Call Saul is the most accurate depiction of what I do, with the exception of the dramatic stuff. Very well done, very well written. Really, really good.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Well, Brian, listen, thanks so much for coming on Dark
My
Fringe Radio.
absolute
Listen,
pleasure. Thanks for having
yeah,
me. And
yeah.
if you want to do a series on some of my cases and do a whole podcast on that, we can do it. I'm happy to do it.
I think we're going to have to definitely do that in the future. Brian, thanks again for coming on Dark Fringe Radio. We'll have you come on in the future. And again, it was a pleasure having you on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, Brian. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Yep. You too.
Okay. All right. Take care.